Good morning, Kinaway members, and welcome back to another episode of Kinaway TV. As always, before we kick things off this morning, I'd like to acknowledge the Bundjalung people as the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you all from. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which each and every one of us are tuning in from and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to also extend that respect to other Indigenous peoples who are present here this morning. I'd just like to also take a moment to remind our viewers of the support services currently available for Kinaway members. The first support package on offer, which is in collaboration with the Kinaway member Claystone Marketing, is free access to Claystone's social media and marketing course. The course provides an overview of social media marketing strategies and tools, which helps highlight marketing opportunities for Indigenous businesses. It's a great resource and is really helpful to businesses looking to solidify their online presence. In another collaborative effort, Kinaway is excited to be partnering with Boost Legal Templates. Designed for small businesses, Boost Legal Templates gives you clarity, safety and access to real quality legal templates. Just complete the friendly questionnaire and you will instantly receive your own legal template, which you can take pride in knowing it has been created specifically for your business. This collaboration will save member businesses time, money and ensures businesses are on the go while implementing good business governance. Kinaway is proud to offer members a 25% discount across all Boost legal templates. So if you feel this is something you may be interested in, please contact the Kinaway team. Another support package we're looking to deliver is support for our member businesses around digital capability, whether it be website development, e-commerce capabilities, social media marketing, and many other components surrounding a business and its digital presence. So please keep an eye out for this also. Just briefly, I'd like to also mention the confidential phone crisis line for Victorian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people launched by the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service. The service is for Indigenous people and families who feel they may need to have a yarn with someone about their wellbeing. This 1-800 helpline is a statewide social and emotional wellbeing service. The helpline, whose number is 1-800 95 9563, operates 7 days a week from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. And you'll find their contact information on the screen throughout today's panel discussion. And finally, there are plenty of webinars on various topics available on our Facebook and YouTube channels. So please feel free to jump on at any stage and make yourself familiar with the content. Along with the webinars and support packages mentioned, Kinaway is still offering the usual forms of business support for our members. So if you feel you may need assistance or support of any kind, please feel free to get in contact with the team here at Kinaway. Today, we're pleased to be hosting a three-part series revolving around financial planning, ultimately helping those who participate to be better positioned to create generational wealth. For today's webinar, it'll be a discussion around how to best manage money, and we'll help educate those who, perhaps are in university or who have started working for the first time on how to effectively manage their financial affairs. Some of the key items being covered today will be, just getting ready to effectively manage your money, setting the right behaviour, and also how we can educate our children. Following today's discussion, next Friday, the 13th of November, at 11 a.m. to 12, we'll be presenting part 2 of the financial planning series as we visit the topic of superannuation and the various aspects involved with ensuring your affairs are in order for retirement. And finally, the following Friday, the 20th of November at 11 a.m, Kinaway will be presenting our third and final episode of the financial planning series as we host a panel discussion specific to all things investing. For those tuning in, please feel free to post any questions or comments on the Kinaway Facebook and YouTube channels, as I will be joining Linda and Brian as they answer any questions we may receive throughout. We hope you enjoy this morning's panel discussion, and don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notifications to receive future Kinaway updates. And just quickly before I introduce today's panelists, I'd just like to note to please be aware the information provided is factual in use only and is not intended to be financial product advice, legal advice or tax advice, and should not be relied upon as such. The information is general in nature and may omit details that could be significant to your particular circumstances. Joining us on the panel today, we're really fortunate to have Linda Edwards. Linda is a descendant of the Wankamara and Barkindji people of Far West New South Wales and is a passionate advocate for financial inclusion, fairness and financial resilience for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia. Linda has completed the Diploma of Financial Counselling and has been involved with the consultation groups around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander financial literacy, the Commonwealth Consumer Affairs Advisory Council, Indigenous Financial Services Network, Telstra Indigenous Advisory Committee, Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman Consumer Panel, the ABA Consumer Outcomes Group, Indigenous Financial Resilience Research Project with the First Nations Foundation, Australian Council for International Development, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Financial Literacy Forum, which is now in its 13th year. After spending more than a decade in the finance sector, Linda is now the Coordinator of Financial Capability at Financial Counselling Australia. Joining Linda, we're fortunate to have Brian Wyborn joining us. Brian is a proud Torres Strait Islander and Senior Wealth Advisor at JB Ware. Brian holds a Master of Financial Planning, Bachelor of Business, and has completed the Australian Institute of Company Directors Foundations of Directorship course. Brian is also a Commissioner for Declarations, accredited financial planner with the Financial Planning Association of Australia, a tax advisor with the Tax Practitioners Board, and affiliate member of the AICD. Outside of his private wealth advisory role, Brian holds a non-executive director position and is a current serving member of the Australian Army Reserve. I'd like to welcome both Brian and Linda for today's panel discussion.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Kicking things off, Linda, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your current role at Financial Counselling Australia?
Certainly. Firstly, I'd just like to say I'd like to acknowledge traditional owners on all the lands on which everyone may be sitting. I'm currently sitting in central New South Wales on the land of the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So my role with Financial Counselling Australia as a coordinator for financial capability is quite a huge role, but specifically it is to assist services that employ financial capability workers across Australia by setting up a community of practice where capability workers can find support, information, and do professional development opportunity training. My role also includes any advocacy and lobbying around financial literacy issues, both with financial services, so banks and other financial institutions, regulators, and government. If I continue on, we'll probably be here all day, but that's basically the work that I do at a national level.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. And Brian, going across to you, can you tell us a bit about your role as a Senior Wealth Advisor at JB Ware?
Yeah, for sure. And likewise, I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on where we all meet. I'm here in Brizzy, sunny Brizzy, so I want to acknowledge the Turrbal and Giagra people and also pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all you mob out there as well, joining us across Australia. So what do? I think I'm a financial advisor. My role is really working with two subset of clients. I work with individuals and I work with not-for-profits and charitable organisations. Working with individuals, I particularly work with business owners, members in professional services, and talking more about their personal financial situations. On the flip side, when I work with boards and charitable organisations, it's really about looking at their funds and ensuring that their future generations can benefit from that. So the area I'm real passionate about is working with blackfellas, right? And working with Indigenous organisations and working in the native title space as well to ensure that the future funds, are there for future generations, not only today, but, work into perpetuity.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. I know that we just touched on, obviously your role now. And just personally, can you tell us a little bit about your own personal sort of money journey and, how you kind of into this kind of role?
Yeah, 100%. I think my journey started early. I think it started with looking at the foundations in the house, right? And mum was the real one that set these kind of instilled these principles in me. So I think my money journey started really early and realizing that it's got to come from the family, and that this knowledge has to come from the family. And when mum got paid and there was money coming to the household, it was ensuring that the things were looked after, getting food on the table, paying bills. And I think for me, my financial journey started there with really strong principles, and mum led that stuff. And so for me, that's where it started. And I think the second part where that's evolved is my formal education and working in financial advice. I think come in with those principles initially and then building on them, particularly the things around behavioral science and really understanding the fundamentals of the wealth game that we all play, and really understanding that part of it, that's been, that immense, right? That's really is what's helped me set up my views on money and how I participate in that. So I'd say my money journey started really early, but it's kind of built its way through, particularly with my career as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. And Linda, can you tell us a little bit about your money journey?
Well, my journey is a little bit different to Brian. So in terms of what I knew, I learnt later in life. I just remember growing up and seeing that, when it was the payday, everyone knows what payday is. I understood that, nobody went to school. Everyone followed mum downtown, and mum was there with the money, getting the money out of the bank, and everyone got their little fair share of that. And I suppose coming from a huge family as well, so I have 5 brothers and 8 sisters. Having all the hand-me-down stuff, and then having the opportunity, as Brian says, of actually getting a really good education and really understanding, for me, what was my priority in life. And I learned that way in my 30s. So there was nothing before that, because basically we had nothing, It was really interesting that when I had my own children, that I started thinking about the priorities in my life and actually using those priorities then to set a lot of boundaries for myself in terms of the money that I was getting. And so it was hard at first, and I'll talk a little bit about that moving forward in terms of a helping family. But I think just letting people know that, sometimes we learn early, sometimes we learn late, but, I think in terms of what I know now is that passing on that expertise and that information to family and to extended family would really help us.
Absolutely, Linda. And it's, when you talk about that relationship with money kind of happening a little bit later on in life, do you think that is it's a common theme among the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander sort of population, like really, kind of having that understanding later on rather than earlier?
Well, we've got to remember that really money has only been in our society for a very short amount of time. I'm thinking probably the last 3 or 4 generations. I remember a conversation that I had with an MP at Parliament House one time when we were talking about financial literacy, and she sort of said, "Oh, it's the parents' responsibility to teach their kids about money." And, continued to give us this whole talk for about 10 minutes. And I sort of said to her at the end of her spiel was, well, I didn't really learn about money. My parents didn't teach me about money. And she sort of said, well, why? Why didn't they teach you? And I said, well, they weren't taught. And so then she said, well, why weren't they taught? And I said, well, my grandparents were paid in rations. They were never paid in money. So in terms of my family, money's only been in our society in our family for 3 generations, because they were excluded. They weren't allowed to get wages. And so how do you learn if there's no, expertise, if there's no, experiences with money? So it is a real challenge for us as, First Nations people of where we're going. I think it's moving forward very slowly, but at least now we're not excluded from the economy. We have an opportunity to work and to be able to get our own money and make our own choices around what we do with the money, and that's really important.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda. And Brian, I know that you touched on before that you are passionate about, educating the Indigenous population, around money and finances. For yourself, from what you've sort of experienced, has it been that sort of case, that sort of theme where, the Indigenous population and their relationship with money is, maybe that relationship has come to fruition later on in people's lives?
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's different obligations that we as people have with money. I actually watched a TED talk Linda did recently. So if you get the opportunity to share it with the audience, James, please do. It's a cracker, right? I think there's something Linda touched on there, and when it comes to obligation with money, and I've felt it in my family as well as most, is that I think one of the powerful things about our culture is this idea of kinship, right? And exploring what that means, and it's how we've got to where we are. It's how we share our resources, how we share everything. I think that's really powerful as something that binds us culturally and as people, and helps us through the generations. But at the same time, like we mentioned before, I think that's a really important point, is that money and the relationship with money is only 3 generations, 4 generations deep at max. And this notion of money and how does it work in there. And I think it's really important that we explore, what does cultural obligation with money look like for us? And I think it's an individual journey. There is no one, there is no silver bullet that's going to fix everything. But I think everyone needs to have a cultural journey to understand what is important to them when it comes to money, and what is important to them with money, and talking with their family about that, and really understanding that. So I think, I share Linda's views, and I remember that, when it was fortnight week, we'd go on weekends, right, to the shopping centre, and I'd know that, yes, I'm going to get my violet crumble, because, everyone gets their little bit, and mine was a violet crumble and maybe an ice cream on the way home, and carrying grocery bags, right? But in saying that, I think, that understanding of money is quite new, and that understanding of growing wealth and just participating in the broader financial system is really important. And I think we're getting there. I think it's something we've got to keep having conversations about, and we've got to keep bringing it up, and we've got to talk about this additional obligation we have around money, and how that interplays with our generating wealth and being able to share that wealth in a better way, rather than giving money away as well. And that's a conversation I'd love to see us talk more about into the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. And Linda, I'll bring it back to you. So you're part of the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Literacy Network. Can you tell us a little bit about what that entails, and what your members are kind of seeing and experiencing on the ground?
Yes, thanks, James. So our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Financial Literacy Network is a network of financial counsellors and capability workers that work specifically with our mob on the ground. At the moment, there are around about 160 members on that network, which is an email network. For those people that may not know, financial counselling and financial capability workers is a free service, and the services are all across Australia. And so they assist people with any type of issues that they have with money. Financial counsellors deal specifically with debt and credit products, whereas capability workers sort of work with, building capacity around money management with our communities. The work that our network does, which is an amazingly proactive network as well, is just totally amazing. The work also, it allows me to do that national advocacy and lobbying work with financial services regulators and government around, the issues that we're seeing on the ground. And those issues, certainly are things like, being excluded or limited access to banking services. Like we know that in our regional and remote communities, there's very little bank branches on the ground. And so how do people do their banking? How do they go and open an account when it's, 400 or 500 kilometres away, one-way trip? Or the fact is that there's no, transport available to get people from one community to another. Telecommunications is really an issue. I mean, who understands all of the, PDFs that come from telecommunication or even, financial services around their products? Who really truly understands those documents when they're buying a financial product? And given that, our history with money, it's really challenging for people to sort of understand, how money works, and also to the power that they have when the money's in their hand. Like when you have that money in your hot little hand, you have the power to be able to spend it where you want to spend it, or to be able to use it where you want to use it. And financial services are screaming for you to give that money to them. So you have a lot of power in terms of that. For some of our communities, identification is a massive issue. You know, how do you when, I don't know about you, but in our family, it's usually nan or mum that holds all the birth certificates, or all of the important documents, and they sort of sit, you know, in another town. So when you actually have to have, you know, your identification to be able to prove who you are, it's really challenging. It's challenging particularly for people in remote communities, you know, for when, if they want to, for example, open a bank account, how difficult that is for them to be able to do that. So there's lots of issues, food security within our regional and remote communities, you know, because there's not a lot of shopping centres in those communities. I don't want to miss out that, you know, the issues that remote and regional people are seeing are sometimes seen in urban centres as well. So I do want to acknowledge that, you know, First Nation people in the city do have some of these issues as well. You know, having the confidence to be able to walk into a bank and ask someone about a financial product is a real challenge for some of our people, because of what's happened to us historically, in terms of, you know, being left out of the economy, you know, not being seen as citizens, and not being given the same rights as non-Indigenous people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda. And I know you just touched on a few sort of challenges that communities might face or firms might face too. And you recently just did a talk on humbugging as well. Can you just tell us just a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so I've always thought about this. I mean, as a young person in a job, and I'm sure a lot of people on the phone, I know that Brian said that this had affected him as well. You know, when you get your first job and you get that first pay, it's like all the mob saying, oh, you're a worker now, you can share that with us. And, you know, and whilst it's great, our cultural obligation is our greatest asset, it's also the thing that lets us down, particularly in terms of money. You know, if the money is, if like, you know, when someone gets paid and, you know, they're wanting to help their families because it's reciprocated, because when that family member then gets money, they do the same thing to their family. I think it's when it's not reciprocated and where there's bad behaviour involved, I think is when there's a challenge for us. And as a First Nation person, or as an Aboriginal person, I feel that giving money to my family basically sets them up to fail in terms of their own financial resilience, because if I'm not there and they're not looking after their money and not doing, you know, the priority things that they need to do, like pay the rent, you know, pay their bills, ensure that there's food on the table, you know, for their family. If they're not doing that, then where do they end up? And so it's a responsibility for us as part of our obligation as well to our families to actually instill that behaviour in them. And, you know, I'm happy if people want to come to my house and they want to feed or they want a bed, that's fine. That's no worries. But please don't ask me for money for things that you really don't need. And I think that's, you know, a real challenge for us. You know, how do you have a conversation with your family when they're sort of saying to you, oh, you know, I don't have any food from my kids because I, you know, went and did whatever they would do, and the money was wasted. How do you have the conversation with them to say, I can't give you the money for your kids, for you to buy food for your kids, because that's your mob, that's your family. And so I've just found, look, I'm happy to take you to Vinnie's to get a food voucher. Let's work on next fortnight when you get paid. I'll pick you up. I'll take you shopping so you can get the food for your family, and then you can spend the money wherever you want. I think that routine that we have in our lives is really, really challenging for us. And, you know, I love that we are such a strong community, and our obligations to our family and to our communities is really strong. But look at where we're allowing our families to fail.
Sure. Thanks, Linda. And Brian, going back to you. So, you know, is there anything that you'd like to add to Linda's description of humbugging, and, you know, just that sort of cultural obligation, that family obligation? Is that something that you would take into account, you know, when providing advice to, you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clients, for example?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. It's it's the hammer on the nail, right? I think it's having a really strong understanding of that is so important to then give proper financial advice. And I think I'm cognizant that as a financial advisor talking here today, these are my personal views. These are not the views of the company. These are my views and what I've come to understand working with Indigenous people. So I take this in a sense that, this is general in nature, and everyone needs to ensure that this is, they have a conversation and seek advice before they make their decisions. But there's probably really two key things I'd love to talk to in this space when it comes to developing a financial plan or developing a structure that helps you achieve what you're trying to do. And for me, it's two things. That you've got to set goals, but then you've got to give yourself the structure to actually achieve them. And when it comes to Indigenous Australians, we need to have that structure there, and we need to make it easy for ourselves. So, James, I shared something with you I'd love to talk through really quickly, just on what helped me articulate what I'm meant to trying to tell here today. And we can share that PowerPoint. That'll be really, set the structure for this part. I think, for me, goal setting is everything when it comes to understanding what you want to get out of how you want to accumulate wealth. And, I'll use the analogy of weight loss, right? When we're building goals and when we're thinking about our financial future, let's use the analogy of weight loss. A goal of I want to lose weight is too broad and hard. And one of the things I continually advocated around is building SMART goals. So it needs to be specific. It needs to be specific. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be attainable, realistic, and timely. So having a goal like I want to lose weight is too lofty. Having a goal that's more specific, like I want to lose 5 kilos in the next 6 months, that's something that's more achievable. So when we're thinking about financial futures and how we actually do this, goal setting is probably one of the key components of that. Is what do I want to do with my wealth? How do I generate and grow my wealth? And then how am I able to make sure that I look after my family and my community in that sense as well? So for me, the first part of it is got to have a goal. Build yourself a financial target that you want to work with, but apply a SMART methodology when you're building these goals and break it out as well. And what I've just shown on the screen there is a really simple way to talk through your goals when it comes to that. The next part of that is adopting a structure. The key thing is, it's the dirty word of budget, right? I don't like to use the word, but look, it's got its purpose. For me, understand what your obligations are when it comes to money, and a budget really helps you do that. It's not something that's that's set in concrete that you stick to. It's just a tool to help you get what you're trying to achieve. So when I think about a structure, or the first part, set a goal. Okay, well, how do I do that? Build a structure around helping you do that. This next part of it is really understanding what are my fixed obligations, what's my rent, what's my mortgage repayments, what are things that I know that are constant. Understand your baseline effectively. Then what are some occasional costs that may sneak into it as well? And we see things like, what's my car registration going to look like in 6 months' time or 12 months' time? We know those are occasional expenses, but they're pretty much set and fixed, and they tend to happen. Then a budget will really help you get there, to understand those baseline conversations. And then that there's variable things that come up from time to time. And this is probably where our obligations with money are a bit more broader as Indigenous Australians. And I know that if someone asks within family, you're more there's a bigger propensity for you to give that money. So in some way, shape or form, if you are obliged that way and you do that, have a component within your baseline that that's going to be there as well. And then finally, adopt a structure. So what I mean by adopt a structure is make it easy for yourself. When your money comes in, we've all got internet banking these days. Make it easy. Utilize the technology that's there. Set up direct that go to different accounts that help you start to build a structure. And it's about that behavioral science piece, right? For me, that's the kicker. That's the bit where you set yourself up for success. Once you understand your goals, and then you understand what your baseline is when it comes to expenses, then you know what your surplus component will be, and that can start to go to your savings bucket, and that is where you'll start to achieve your goals into the future. And here's the cool thing about the behavioral science bit is that once you start to see that component grow and you're achieving that, it starts to continually motivate you by actually achieving those goals. So, for me, the kickers there are, thanks for sharing that, by the way. The real kickers there are set a goal, make sure it's specific so you can achieve it, give yourself the structure and the biggest propensity or probability to achieve it by building on that structure, by really understanding what your baselines are. And that's cultural obligation. For me, it's a baseline cost. I just factor it in because I know at some point I will say yes. Even though I'm quite stubborn and I am pretty set in my ways, I know how to say no pretty easily. There are times where I will say yes, and I know that. So build those baseline into it, but then give yourself the right behaviors. Set it up automatically. It's so easy. We've got technology to do that. And I was watching you, James, earlier, and setting this up. You're all over technology. There is a ton of young Indigenous Australians, that understand technology, and I don't want to say they don't because I know they do, is give yourself the biggest propensity to achieve that, set it up automatically, and then reward yourself. When you start to see you achieving those goals, take credit in that and reward yourself. But the key things are goal setting and structuring. Make it easy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. And that took us over to that question as well, because I know we spoke about, some of the challenges, and then I wanted to ask, what are some strategies and tools that we can do, to really help us to accumulate wealth and things like that. So that was great. Linda, is there anything else that you'd kind of like to add to that? Any sorts of tips or, strategies, any tools, any resources?
Look, in terms of financial counsellors and capability workers, they're amazing working with people. And what normally happens is those services really try to invest locally. So it's usually local people that are running these programs. And talking about the budget, financial counsellors and capability workers use money plans, which are really specific to the actual fortnight. What income is actually coming in a fortnight, and what is actually going out on expenses. So then you actually have a really good idea of then setting that budget that Brian was talking about. And having a financial goal that's really realistic for you, I think is the most important thing. And I probably just want to say to people on this session is that really you are the expert of your own journey. You are and your own lives. So you know what will work and what won't work. It's just really getting those tips and tools from those other experts to then be able to put your plan into place. So whether you see a financial planner in terms of building that wealth, or whether you see a financial counsellor or a capability worker to assist with with your debts, or to maybe set up a financial goal, that's those. Remembering that those things are tools for you to use. It's really about your behaviour. What do you need to change in terms of your behaviour to be able to then look at, realistically what your financial goal is. I remember sitting down doing a workshop when I used to be a financial counsellor with a group of elderly women, and they said, "Oh, you're here to give a talk on money." I said, "Yeah, I am." But I started the conversation with, "What's the priority in your life? What's important to you?" And they sort of said, "Oh, isn't this about money?" And I said, money is a tool. Money is a tool to be able to get you where you need to go, and to be able to help your family. So firstly and initially, you need to think about what are the priorities in your life, what's important to you, and then use that money to be able to reach that potentially that goal.
Absolutely. And I know that this will be the final question, because we've had plenty of questions that come through. So this will be the final one for the both of you. And I'll start with yourself, Linda. So now that we spoke about having the right sort of resources and things like that, and I know that Brian mentioned, the whole behavioural kind of aspect of it. Is there any sort of strategies there that people can kind of apply? I'll use myself for example. I remember when I was younger, and I kind of saw something, I wanted to get it, but my old man used to tell me, just sleep on it. If you want it tomorrow, then maybe it's something that you want to get. But rather than just being spontaneous and just getting it, just sleep on it. Then if you still want it, then maybe consider it. But are there any other sorts of strategies like that? that people can use that might help them achieve their savings goals?
I think it's like one of the things that some people do is they put their financial goal on their fridge, for example. So they'll have a picture of their kids, and that picture could be, next to a picture of a car or next to a picture of a holiday. And so to be able to go to the fridge and look at that and go, yeah, I'm saving up for my kids, so that when you go and you think, oh, gee, I wish I had that little bit of money, I could, go and buy something new or something that you really needs and wants are two different things. So if it's a want, then you need to recognize what it is that you want to buy on impulse. Is it a need? Is it a want? And then use that to then say, okay, it's a want. So do I actually really don't need it? Because you know what I need to do? I need to take my kids on a holiday, or I need to be able to buy a car so I can be independent. I don't have to wait for mob to pick me up to take me to work. Or, if I get a car and I get a license, I can get that job at the mines. Or, so it's really thinking about what is the need, what is the want, and applying that to whatever it is that you want to purchase, or, what's that impulse that you want to do. I mean, it's like shopping centres. I think about shopping centres all the time when I think about needs and wants. Look at what shopping centres do. They put all the lollies and all the really bad stuff right at the checkout, Don't take your kids shopping, for example, when you want to. Like, these are some of the tips that financial capability workers will give to people. When you go shopping, take a list of what you need to buy. Like, look in your cupboards, see what it is, because sometimes you'll buy things that are already there and it's really a waste of money. Don't take your kids shopping, because I know myself, you see kids at the checkout scream, I want that lolly, I want this, I want that. So it's really important. Don't go shopping when you're hungry, because that's where you impulse buy. Always, shop, have a feed before you go, because you always think, oh, I'm hungry now, I think I'll buy that. And yeah, so and just remembering that, supermarkets put the things that are not selling as quickly at the ends of the aisle. So they're not usually specials and they're not usually cheaper. They're just things that are just are selling really slowly. So needs and wants, put it towards whatever the product or whatever you're wanting to buy, and then working out from there what it is.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda. And Brian, is there any sort of advice that you have in terms of, the behavioural aspects to money management?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Look, I'll reinforce Linda's point. I'm a very visual person. So I'll chunk it up one more, though. I think you touched on it earlier, is understand your values. What are your drivers, and are they important to you to actually want to achieve it? Once you understand that values, you can then build out your goal sets to achieve it. But what I'll reinforce Linda's point. I'm very visual. I have a vision board at home, actually. Vision board has pictures of things that we want to achieve. So at the moment we're renovating, right? So we've got pictures of that, and it's going to keep us going through this really painful period where I know we're going to be, living out of our home, driving here, there, and the other to drop kids at school, the crazy life that it is, right? But that vision board helps me really, ensure that I'm tracking towards that goal, and I'm very visual in that sense. So just understanding yourself and really knowing, are you a tactile person? Are you a visual person? Are you more detail orientated? Understanding yourself and what your kickers are and what your drivers are, that really helps then you build in your own system to achieve it. The second one's a really practical one, and this one is the one I utilize, and me and my wife have utilized this for a really long time. When we get paid, it doesn't go into an account that I can access on my debit card. It goes into a separate bank account where then I have automatic transfers that tell me where our money needs to go, so I don't have to worry about it. But what also happens from that bank account is it then automatically transfers me money. So I used to get paid monthly, right, which is a pain. But it then automatically sends me money weekly to the card that I can actually use to spend money. And once I've spent the money, it's gone. So for me, that's been a really practical way of managing money, is that, yeah, when we get paid, it goes into a totally separate account. We don't have access to the account. Direct debits come out of there to tell us where money needs to go. And the second part of that is pay yourself. And the other, pay on a Monday, so that by Friday, if you're done, you're done. So that for me has been really practical, and it's worked really well. And the other thing too is it builds in that right psychology. If I need money, I need to take it out from another account that's got an allocated goal attached to it. So I'm consciously taken away from that goal, knowing that it's detrimental to what I'm trying to achieve there, so that it builds the right type of psychology and the right type of behavioral, the behaviors I want to instill in myself, and they're the same behaviors I want to instill into my kids too. The oldest only 5, so she's getting there. But anyway, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Can I just say that I use exactly the same method that you use as well, Brian. So I do have separate accounts, and I do pay myself on a weekly basis as well too. So it's really interesting. It doesn't have to be rocket science, eh? It doesn't have to be rocket science. It's such a simple way of actually getting yourself into that routine.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Linda, and thanks, Brian. That's gone really fast, that little panel discussion. We've had plenty of questions that have come through. So we might spend the next, 5 to 10 minutes just answering some of these questions that we've had. Now, I understand the first one will come up. This first one is from Jackson. How do I effectively save? Is there a certain amount of income I should try and save each pay packet? Is there some sort of strategy you suggest? I know that you touched on it before. Brian, I might send this one to you. So I know maybe what Jackson was referring to was, is there a certain percentage that maybe you should look to try to save from each pay? Or
mate, look, I look at these things as it's everyone has their own goal. Yes, there are basic principles out there that talk about, minimum saving should be around 10% of your surplus cash or your net income effectively. So, when we think about net income, take away tax, whatever hits your bank, that's your net income. Then you have a net surplus. Once all your expenses are taken away, that's your net surplus. Rough rule of thumb is always, try and save 10% at a minimum. I say, know yourself first, understand your values, understand your drivers, then set your financial goals. I'm not one for saving for the sake of saving. My wife is, I'm not. So for me, it needs to be personal and it needs to be goal orientated or going somewhere. So understand what you want, what are your drivers, then set that specific goal for yourself to then save that. If you're a university student and you want to have some time off after mid-semester exams and go on a trip, that's a savings goal, right? Have that specific target, because once you start achieving that, it reinforces those right behaviors with money. Look, for me, there's no hard and fast rule. The big kicker is know what you want and then set that target. Once you understand your baseline, then you can set a realistic target on, well, what's my surplus? After I've done my baseline, what's my surplus? Then I can start to plan for the future, utilizing that surplus.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. And Linda, any sort of advice that you have around saving effectively, and again, any sort of percentage that you should look to save after all the taxes and expenses go out?
Look, I don't look at percentages in terms of savings. The fact that I have a separate account that has which money that I can actually access, and then one for bills, and then one other for emergencies. The money goes into that bills account. I get paid out of that bills account. What's left over after everything's paid is your savings. So you don't even have to think about it. So if you don't touch that bills account, and even if it's $100 a fortnight, that's going to be left there. After a while, if you don't touch it, it still builds up. And then you can look at that and say, okay, that some of that could go into the emergency account, or you know what, I'm just going to leave it there because I don't need to touch it, and it'll eventually build up. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a percentage. I think it's what, as Brian said, you need to look at what your needs are in terms of that, and then and from your net income after paying all your bills, that could potentially be your savings. And it may only be that you start off at $20 a week or $20 a fortnight. Eventually it'll build up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda.
No.
Next one. This one's from Dylan, and he says, thanks for this morning, Linda and Brian. What's the most important thing I should teach my kids about money? I'll give that one to you, Linda.
Look, initially, I think Brian and I have had lots of conversations about this since we've met. The thing that you need to understand is that you need to have regular conversations with your kids about money. They need to understand. You can't just say, I'm sorry, we can't get that thing because we can't afford it. For kids, is they're just hearing, you don't want to buy me that. So I think kids are very resilient. And so the important thing that you should talk to them about is where you're actually sitting in terms of your budget for the household. A lot of financial capability workers actually have conversations with families in terms of household budgets. So not just the one person will sit down and do their money plan, it's the whole house. And so everyone sees which bills are being paid. It's all transparent. And so that they then know, geez, I can't ask mum for that money because I know this week this is all the money that's going on that bill. So I think in terms of what's the most important thing to teach your kids about money is that, regular savings will certainly set them up for life if they get into that routine of saving. If they're getting a pocket money, for example, or they're getting paid for jobs that they may do around the house, talk to them about, well, okay, you're getting this money. How about if you spend half and you save half? And you can actually give them their accounts and say, gosh, for this 3 months, this is how much you've saved. And they will actually say, I need to be able to do that. And that sets the basis for them for life.
Sure, thanks, Linda. Brian, is there anything that you'd like to add to what Linda has provided?
Yeah, look, I think I'm learning that journey, right? I'm learning that journey, but I think the things that are really important for me is I want my kids to understand the obligations that we as parents have, and they'll have it at some point in their life as well. So one of the things, and just to preface this, I've got a 3 and a 5 year old, so they're super young at the moment. So I'm learning these things as we go. But one thing I do talk to them about is opportunity cost of money. That's a really big one for me is if I get you this, you don't get that. And under them then, internalizing what's more important for me. Do I want that or do I want that? So I emphasize opportunity cost of money to them, and I'm trying to instill that at this young age. Equity of effort is also important for me. So, the 5-year-old keeps saying, I do more jobs, Daddy. And I'm like, yeah, but guess what, baby? You're going to get more than she does because you've done more job. I do more work around the house. I'm doing more cleaning. So for me, equity of participation and being rewarded for that, whether that's financially or, chocolates or whatever reward system that we have is also an important thing. It's how much you contribute is how much you get out, right? So there's some really basic principles I'm trying to instill in my kids. But I think the big overarching ones, particularly when they start to get older, is understanding the financial system and how it works. I think, I guess my kids will be lucky in the sense that I'll be having these conversations, but we should all be having these conversations, regardless of where our financial literacy may be or understanding of the fundamentals around this stuff. We should be imparting what we have. I think that's the most important thing, particularly when it comes to finance. Let's impart what we know so that they can make better decisions in the future.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. And thanks, Dylan, for the question. The next one is from Jessica. She asks, I've just started a job and have some disposable income. I know everyone says I should save, but I want to go for a holiday and possibly get a new car. Are there any ways I can possibly do both? Linda, I'll let you have this one.
Yeah, I actually had a workshop with my 2 nieces and my nephew because they were wanting to go on a cruise. They're all on Centrelink benefits, and they we want to do this trip. And so we actually did this whole visual money budget plan thing that was that they were able to sort of who's paying what in terms of that. So I think for this, it just depends, Jessica, when do you want to go on holidays and when do you want to get that new car? Are they things that are going to happen at the same time? Is it possible that you want to go on holiday first and get a new car? I have a holiday every year or every 2 years as much as I can. I don't pay outright for my holiday. I know that in 18 months I want to go to this holiday. So I actually work it out with the travel agency and I pay them on a fortnightly basis. So by the time that the holiday comes around, I have already paid for it. So, there are different ways to do this. In terms of a new car, I think that you need to find out, is it with the disposable income, are you able to outrightly buy a new car or a second-hand car, or do you want to go and get a loan for a car and get credit for that? So look at where you're actually, going to source that loan and what are the interest rates and on that. So, yeah, I think there's just different ways of doing it. And so I suppose it's just really I mean, you may need a new car. You may need a car for work, Jessica. So what's your needs, what's your wants in terms of that. But also too, as Brian said, we need to ensure that we are rewarding ourselves. So, you know, a holiday is always something really good. So in terms of that, I would be saying, well, when do you want to do that? And is there a timeline for it? What's going to be reasonable to save in terms of those?
Wonderful. Thanks, Linda. I am a little bit conscious of time, so we'll take a couple more questions, and then I think that'll have to be it for this morning. So this next one's from Jared, and he says, "Hi all, I have a question for Brian. I have a little one, and I want to put a little nest egg aside that I can contribute to so they can access it when they get older. Is there any certain type of account or strategy I should consider? Should I just leave it to gain interest, or maybe look to invest some?"
Yeah, I think that's one I get asked a lot, and there are a myriad of things out there that you can look at to do that. It's all about understanding the accessibility of it at some point, right? I think it's the starting point is probably finding out what is the end point first. At what point do you want to give it to your kid? At what point do you want them to access it? What do you want that nest egg to do for your kid? I think that will help you make the decision backwards. What I mean by that practically is, you know, if your kid's 1 year old at the moment and you want to help them with whether it's high school education, whether you want to help them with purchasing a car at 21, whatever it is, understand the starting point needs to be the end point. Understand what that end point is, because then that'll help you refine your financial product suite that you want to look at. And like I said, there's a myriad of financial products out there that can help you achieve that. It might be as simple as paying down your debt, because then you know that at some point in the future you're going to have surplus cash because you're not paying down as much debt to then help your kids at that stage. It could be sticking it in the offset account, letting it offset the interest repayments on there, or it could be actually putting it into a financial product that achieves a certain rate of return for you that you can draw on either as income where it gives you additional income, or whether you sell it and you actually take the capital to then give to your kid. So I think the important bit is go to the end first, understand what you want that outcome to be for you or your kid, and it can be flexible, right? I think with these things, you want to ensure that there's a level of flexibility. Start there, then work your way backwards and say, well, what are all of the different options I can look at? It could be investments, it could be investing in securities, it could be investing in equities that actually generate a dividend into the future. It could be things like education bonds. There's a ton of actual products out there that can help you do that, but without knowing what you want it to do in the end, it's hard to give specifics. So my suggestion would be really identify what the end needs to look like. What are you trying to help your kid do? And then work your way back and look at all the myriad of options you have. Sorry, it's very vague. I know it's been very vague, but I think that's the best place to start.
Of course. Thank you, Brian. We have two questions left, and this next one is from Marg, and she says, "Hi, Brian and Linda. I recently saw the RBA passed some low cash rates. What does a cash rate mean? And what does this mean for any loans I might already have, and for any money I have sitting in my bank accumulating interest?" Brian, I'll let you have that one as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay. The RBA cash rate is really two things. How much time do we have? We could probably, I'll try to wrap this up in less than 3 minutes. It's trying to do two things, what the RBA is trying to do. Reducing the cash rate is trying to stimulate the economy by making debt cheaper. So banks will effectively do that in two ways. They'll either reduce the interest that you're paying on your loans. And at the moment, the banks have only done that to fixed loan rather than variable loan components. So it's only a small subset of the market. And what they're trying to promote there is surplus cash for individuals like you and me to then go pump in the economy. Based in a quick nutshell, is they're trying to stimulate growth by giving Australians additional surplus cash by hopefully reducing debt commitments. The other part of what that does is it also does that on a larger level for businesses too. They then reduce their debt obligations, so their debt payments on the debt they have as businesses. They can then reinvest into the business that hopefully generates additional employment and has that flow-on effect. So that's probably one part of what the RBA is doing. The other bit is they're looking at the bond market and buying government bonds. So effectively, I was trying to see if I can be very succinct on this. They're purchasing additional bonds to push people out of the fixed interest market when it comes to the asset classes, so that people go into more risk type asset classes to then generate a return like equities and shares. So it's a twofold approach what the RBA is doing in trying to stimulate the economy. One is just trying to get surplus cash so that we can go buy more things, and hopefully that generates larger GDP. The other flip side is they're trying to push people out of a certain asset class into more risk asset classes to generate growth in that sense as well. But practically for me, hopefully it means that I get more surplus cash by not making as much repayments on my debt.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian, and thank you, Marg, for the question. Final one that you have is from Mark Edwards. Any good books to read on this subject? Linda, I'll give you.
I'm just thinking, I only know what's in my head. Maybe this might be an opportunity for a combined book, Brian and James. I don't know, but certainly there would be. There's a lot of resources out there in terms of that. I know that there's the Barefoot Investor book is really good. So there's one for individuals, and there's also one for families. They're usually really good books to have, and we've sort of given a lot of these books out to community members. It's just really an opportunity to just sort of look at really your life and where you're going in your life, which is basically what budgeting is just really looking after your life. So I would suggest, for me, the Barefoot Investor, individuals and families.
Sure. Thanks, Linda. Brian, any books that you suggest to read about money management?
From a personal finance perspective, not a lot, to be honest. I'll probably read, on finance subject, I'll probably read more periodicals just to stay attached to the market there. For me, it's, I probably couldn't make a solid recommendation on personal finance books.
Sure. That's right. No problem. Well, I think we are almost out of time. So just on behalf of Kinaway and Kinaway's members, I want to thank both yourself, Linda and Brian, for joining us this morning for this morning's panel discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. Thank you very much for being here. Very grateful and privileged to be part of this. Thanks.
Yeah, and the same for me. Thank you very much. It's great to be able to pass on, some of the information. And I'm happy for you to give out my email address in terms if there are any people that want to catch up later on.
Wonderful, absolutely. Thanks, Linda.
Okay,
once again, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Linda, and thank you to everyone who tuned in this morning. We hope you all enjoyed this morning's panel discussion, and don't forget to keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars as well. If you do wish to attend these, please jump onto the Kinaway website to register your interest. And again, if you wish to catch up on the previous Kinaway TV panel discussions or webinars, jump onto the Facebook or YouTube channels where you'll be able to access them. Until then, don't forget to leave a like on today's video, subscribe, turn on the notifications to receive Kinaway updates, and have a wonderful weekend.